Hey guys, Ben from Pivot Wealth here, and today, I'm be taking you through the how to buy your first home or investment property. Now, can someone just pop into the chat, do me a favor, and just make sure that that share is coming through? Okay, you guys can see my slides here. Perfect. Thanks, Cleo. Cheers, everyone. Cool. So today we're talking about how to get on the property ladder with confidence. I'll give you some of the tips and hacks that I found really helpful when going down this space, as well as some of the things to look out for so to avoid making mistakes. So. And then we'll get into some practical sort of how to plan around your property purchase as well. As Claire said, any questions as we go through, feel free to pop them into the Q&A, not the chat. If you want to have a bit of banter in the chat, that's fine. Pop the questions into the Q&A. May answer some as we go through. We'll see how we're going, but definitely going to circle back on them at the end too. Guys, just shout out to the legends over at General Assembly for hosting today, and for Raiz Home Ownership, who have collaborated on this partnership as well. Both doing some really cool stuff. So if you're keen to learn more about them, I would strongly suggest you check out their stuff on their site. So before I jump into the content, just for any lawyers that are watching along, please don't rush out and make any life-changing decisions off the back of the presentation today. I would strongly encourage you to seek out personalized advice before jumping in. With property, property is something that it is really, it's a massive decision, so you should be doing that anyway. So, I've got this slide. Clearly, I haven't got my animations quite right, but this slide that shows the median house price growth over the last 25 years, well, actually the last 28 years, and then into the future. So I'll talk you through these numbers, but what it's all based on is the average long-term return on Australian residential property, which is 6.8%. This is basically the return on property for the last, I look back like 6 decades, and it's essentially the super long-term return on the median house price growth in Australia. Now, what I found this report actually on the 25-year period from 1993 to 2018, and in that time we saw the median house price increase from 94,000 to 445,000, which is basically a 400% growth on the property price. And then what I did is I looked at where it was at today, and we've seen a pretty massive growth again from 2018 to 2021. Obviously, we're in a very hyperinflated market at the moment, though, so take that one with a grain of salt. But what I've then done is I've extrapolated out sort of like what if the returns continue, like if the property growth continues at the same rate that it has in the past, what it would be in 10 years from now, and then 20 years from now. And look, I firmly believe, we know that the past doesn't predict the future, and it's not a definite, but I don't see a reason why the property would not continue to grow at the rate that it has for the last 6 decades. In Australia, we're fortunate. We've got COVID has been massively disruptive, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that. But we've seen, we live in a beautiful country in Australia. We've got population growth, strong population growth, sort of not over obviously the last sort of year and a half, but like on an average sort of context. And these places are in demand. So if the prices continue at the rate that they have in the past, that we see that in 10 years from now, the average property, the median house price is going to be around $2 million. And then in 10 years time, it's going to be around $4 million. And these numbers look really big. Look, keep in mind that in 20 years time, it's probably cost $10 for a latte down at your favorite cafe. But so there is an inflation element with these numbers, but also that we see that the numbers are just getting bigger, and it sort of is following that sort of that rough rule of thumb that property tends to double every 10 years. We see it's doubling pretty much here, almost doubling again. Again, just based on this average return profile. So I suppose that part of the reason that I put this up is, one, it's sort of interesting, but really that because the property market just continues to grow over time, that the sooner you get in, the sooner you start getting your results. So I see a lot of people that they get stuck in this inaction trap because property is such a big decision and you're not sure what to do. You don't want to do the wrong thing. You don't want to stuff it up. So you end up doing nothing. But in the meanwhile, the property market is just continuing on. So a little bit of motivation to whatever your property plans are to try and make them happen sooner. And that way you can benefit from that growth over time. So look, obviously, you know, we're buying property in a post-COVID environment, but and so a whole bunch of things have changed. We're seeing interest rates below 2%. We're still waiting on what exactly the new normal looks like. The property market, in my view, has been permanently disrupted by the fact that now people are living from home. We're seeing a massive push to regional areas, people wanting to live in places out of the city because they no longer need to commute. A lot of companies, tech companies in particular, going remote first and giving people the option to work in that way, which is led to that disruption. And then the government sort of splashing cash around left, right, and centre, which is further fueling you know, both property but the economics as well. But look, that being said, there are a lot of things that are unchanged. You know, people still want to live a great lifestyle. There are still smart companies that are making good money, and Bondi is still a popular place that people want to live in. So I think, in my view, the new normal is likely to be pretty normal when it comes to the property market. So I get, though, that it's not easy with this stuff. You know, these are some of the common challenges that I see for people generally with their money, but also specifically with property, that it's this information overload, so many options, so much noise, so many conflicting points of view, mixed messages. And in the property market, there's a lot of hidden agendas or those conflicts that can really have a negative influence on the support or advice that you're being provided. The other challenge that I've got here is people struggling to find the right balance between getting ahead with money at the rate that they want, or, you know, you could think about it, living in an awesome house that you love, and then still being able to live the lifestyle that you want at the same time. So finding that balance between money results and personal wants, emotions, etc. And then the last one is this fear of missing out and FOFU, which is the fear of fucking up, basically. So it's, again, with property, a massive barrier. I touched on it already, but people don't want to do the wrong thing. So you're too worried, you end up doing nothing. And then what happens is you end up stuck, what I've got here, and it's stuck, not stuck doing nothing, but it's stuck doing the same things that you've been doing in the past. And all that time you're missing opportunities to be getting ahead. And like we just saw those gains that are possible when you take action and actually build your money momentum. So I've found that there are 3 elements that you need to get right. And this is, again, broadly with your money, but you can apply the same principles to your property, that when you planning on your property, it's important that you've got a good structure, which is about a good money management structure that makes it easy for you to save and makes it easy for you to manage your money. That's really important because it fits into the next element, which is having a good property strategy. So knowing that, you know, how much can you spend? How much should you borrow? Should you buy investment, owner occupier? You know, what are all of those options? And making sure that you've got the perfect property strategy for you. And then the final element here is about the solutions. You know, what are the investments? What are the properties that you're choosing? But investments that are going to give you that reliable, consistent progress over time and avoid the chances of downsides and setbacks, like those momentum killing mistakes. Now, when it comes to property and when it comes to your money more broadly, if any one of these elements is missing, they end up dragging down the others. If you're good at saving, good strategy, bad investments, bad solutions, you blow up your cash. Good strategy, good investments or solutions, but no structure. It's, well, one, it's hard to have the right strategy, but 2, like, you're working with a leaky bucket. good structure and good investments, good at saving, good investments, but no strategy, you're leaving money on the table, you're not maximizing what you've got going on. So the power of these three together is significantly more than any one on its own, and something for you to be keeping front of mind when you're going down this path with your money. So I'm going to dive into the basics of property here. And what I've got is, I've got here the returns on shares over basically, and maybe I'll start from the start here, seeing as I've got my animations right on this slide. What I've got is an example where you're investing $100,000 into shares at the long-term average return of 8.7%. So if you would have done this a year ago and got that average return, that your $100,000 through growth in the value of the shares and dividends, which are then reinvested into your investments, that your money you would have about $107,000. Then I've gone, well, what happens over the next 9 years to get to 10 years from now? So that 100K, this is not adding any additional money. It's just the initial deposit of 100 grand and then reinvesting any dividends or income that comes off the investment portfolio that you would have somewhere around $197,000. We keep that going for 20 years, $388,000, 30 years, $764,000. We see you're building some good momentum here. And then 40 years, we're 1.5 mil. Again, for the numbers people out there, you'll notice that based on this return of 8.7%, it's every 10 years your money is almost doubling. Not quite, but almost. And then I've contrasted it with buying a property, 500K property at the 6.8% return that I mentioned and explained before. So after 1 year, your property would be worth about $535,000. After 10 years, $985,000, and then 20 years, 1.9 mil, 30 years, 3.8 mil, 40 years, 7.5 mil. Again, we're noticing here that we're almost around about doubling every 10-year period. Now, there's a significant divergence, though, between these two numbers. And the reason, the big driver of that is because when you buy a 500K property, you don't do it with, you often don't do it with $500,000 in cash. You put a deposit in and you pay some costs and then you borrow some money. And then you've got, and you've essentially got leverage now. So that's why, like, the return is almost the same. In fact, the return on shares is slightly higher. But when you factor in the fact that you're investing something like this $100,000 deposit to get this big asset working for you, then we see that there's an enormous difference in the results between the two that you can expect at the back end. And so, like, I think shares have their place. We do a lot of work with people, like helping them invest in shares, but it's a property is going to trump a share portfolio because of that element of leverage. And look, I know when I've sort of put I recognize that there's a lot of numbers on this slide, but one of the questions that I am sometimes asked when I do this run through numbers like this is to say, are those returns reasonable to expect in the future? Yes, it's what's happened in the past, but can we expect this moving forward? And my view is that it's not going to be exactly that. And we know that, investment returns on both property and shares don't follow like a straight line, but there's nothing that I'm aware of that suggests that the return profile would be enormously different from what it's been in the past. As long as property continues to be in demand and people want to live in desirable suburbs, and we'll talk a little bit more about asset selection and how to, I suppose, reduce risk on that front. But I think it's totally reasonable to be expecting a return somewhere around that over the long term. So yeah, leverage here is the key driver of those results. Now, another part of the basics that you should be aware of is the costs to get into property. So the key costs that you need to incur, and I've got the core ones here and some optional costs on the next slide, but the key costs that you need One was stamp duty. Depending on the state that you live in, stamp duty is obviously a state-based tax. And it's different in different states. I know Queensland's a little bit less. In New South Wales, though, and I saw a bunch of people from Sydney on the chat there, that the stamp duty is around 4% of the property value. Now, they are talking about, I was reading recently that they're talking about abolishing the lump sum stamp duty and then having a broader based land tax that applies over a longer period, but obviously that's still just in the works. So 4%, that's a chunk of change though, because if you're buying $1 million property, you're looking at about 40 grand in costs to get into that property. Then the next one is legal fees and title searches. So you need, unless you're a property lawyer, and even then, if you're not an expert at conveyancing, you're going to need someone to actually do the legal part of the titles for your property transfer, excuse me. So you need to have a lawyer or a conveyancer that's able to help you to do that work. The lawyer, and they generally support you with like reviewing the contracts, the titles. But also they can help facilitate like inspections, building and pest inspection, making sure that you're getting a good property and all the legal stuff is correct. And then you've got insurances, insuring the building if you buy a home, or general insurance for strata type buildings. Now, the total of all of those costs works out to be about 5%. So for someone that's looking to buy a property, if you allow 5% as your costs, then you're probably going to be pretty close to the money. We've also got on here, I've put out the optional costs that you might incur when you buy a property. Now, lender's mortgage insurance, that's if your deposit on the property is less than 20%, then the banks will generally charge lender's mortgage insurance on the loan. Lender's mortgage insurance is a very funny insurance in that, well, not funny, but weird funny, that the insurance doesn't really protect you, it protects the banks, because the banks know, and APRA, the Prudential Regulatory Authority, they know that the smaller your deposit is, the more risk there is in your property purchase. If you're not putting in any deposit, then if you default, then the banks are going to lose money because they're going to have to fire sale your property, get a lower price than what it's worth. If they need to sell it quickly, they can end up losing out on cash. So when the deposit is below that 20% mark, they start charging lender's mortgage insurance on your loan. Lender's mortgage insurance is up to about 2%. I think it actually does go a bit higher than that depending on how much you borrow, but up to about 2% of the property. And that's if you put in like a 5% deposit, the lender's mortgage insurance is probably around that 2%. If you put in a 19% deposit, it's going to be a much lower percentage. So it's like a sliding scale. Another thing that you could choose to do is use a property buyer's agent for your property purchase. A property buyer's agent is a person that buys property for people. They're property experts. You basically pay them a fee. In most cases, some of them work on commission, although I'm not a big fan of that. Basically, you pay them a fee and then they'll go out, search the market, based on the brief that you give them, and then they can find a property, negotiate on the property, secure the property for you. They do all of the grunt work, all of the legwork, plus them being, sometimes they get access to properties that aren't on the market because they build relationships with real estate agents, and real estate agents know that buyer's agents can get a quick sale for somebody that wants a quick sale. So they sometimes get access to extra properties, but importantly, they know the market and they know how to negotiate because they're in the property. They've done it a heap of times, and they're in the property market every single day. So that can be a good one. They charge generally a fee of up to about 2% of the property value again. So not a small fee, but if they can, most of the time they can sort of save you that on the purchase price, in addition to the time saving that they'll get from actually just doing all of the work for you. The next one that I've got here is a property financial plan, and that's like the sort of work that we do, where it's you map out the strategy, help you really thoroughly deep dive and figure out how much should you be spending, how much should you be borrowing, what are the things to be aware of. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the planning process when I get to the how to set up a property plan for you guys as well. So look, the entry point for people that are wanting to get into the market, and I've got, including all of those costs as a minimum, so excluding those optional costs, I've got $1 million property. You need at least, generally, rough rule of thumb, and this is a moving target, so check with your mortgage broker, but a 5% deposit is probably about as a minimum that you can put in. Then the $50,000 in costs, which is the 5% costs, stamp duty, legals, etc., and then $20K in lender's mortgage insurance if you only use a 5% deposit. So the total that you need to get into this $1 million property is about $120,000. I just got a note from Katerina on how much property buyer's agent fee is. Yes, up to about 2% of the property value. Some of them work on a fixed fee. Some of them work on a fixed fee, and then they can just quote you. It might be $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, depending on the sort of property and how much support that you want. For people that want to know more about buyer's agents, I just interviewed actually 3 of them on 3 different episodes of my podcast, which you can check out, How to Be Successful with Money. And they go a lot into their process for anyone that's interested in learning more about that. So then I've got here the the entry point with no LMI. So if you want to put this 20% deposit in and avoid the lender's mortgage insurance, we've got a $200,000 deposit that you need, $50,000 in cost. There's no LMI, so the total that you need to get into the market is $250,000. Now, I used $1 million property because that makes nice round numbers, which is easy for me. But you can, if it's $500,000 property, then all of these numbers are halved. Obviously, you can sort of do the maths there as well. So $250,000 to get in, and you might say that, how do we do that? One way that you can do this, and let me tell you, Mother's Day coming up, it's worth buying mum a nice card, but family guarantee or family pledge or going guarantor is something that can help you buy a property with literally $0 deposit. Now, I wouldn't suggest running out and buying a property if you've got $0 in your bank account. But as you see from these numbers, needing to get $250,000 together to buy a property with avoid lender's mortgage insurance, or even $120,000 if you're just looking to get in at the minimum level, that's a decent amount of money. And then I see a lot of people that you're into this sort of in this bit of a vicious cycle that you're saving money to get into the property market, but you're then you're losing. The property market's going up, and then you're constantly just sort of chasing your tail. So, and then there's the situation that even if you've got $120,000 saved up and you want to get into the market, if you buy a property and you're on the hook for this big, almost $1 million mortgage, that it's a bit scary to have no money in the bank. You've got no emergency fund if something goes wrong, or you lose your job, or family sick or whatever. So sometimes, even when you've got a deposit, using this family guarantee can be a good way that you get to keep all of your money in your bank account, and you hold on to that emergency fund. You put it in your offset. Generally, we'll talk a bit more about offsets later on, but put it in the offset, and then you've got the buffer. You're reducing your interest costs, but you've got that bit of extra security. Now, how the family guarantee works, and I've used the example where you need a $250,000 deposit plus costs on this $1 million property. So it's reasonably simple, although the legalities that sit behind it can be a little bit complex. But essentially, you get one loan of the $250,000, and it just gets secured against the family home. Now, this is suitable if you've got, it doesn't have to be family, but it's generally family are the only people that are going to let you secure a loan against their home. But basically, anyone that's got where it commonly happens is you folks have got a property, they've got a low or sometimes no mortgage against that property. So that means that they've got a lot of equity, which is just the difference between the value of the property and how much borrowing is tied to the property. Now, we saw that the banks are generally happy to lend 80%, up to 80% of a property value for a mortgage. Now, you do definitely need to be able to service the debt, and obviously you wouldn't want to do this if you couldn't service the debt anyway, but they'll still do an assessment about your ability to service. So if you're in between jobs or on probation or these sorts of things, probably not going to be suitable. But if you can borrow from the bank and then your family has a decent chunk of equity, simply have the initial loan for your deposit, the deposit money secured against that property. The loan is in your name. It's not in your parents' name. They don't pay the loan. It's in your name. You pay the loan. It's linked to, it sits next to the other loan, which you get, which is just the 80% of the property value. So you essentially end up with two loan splits, or one loan split with two loans. And yeah, you pay down that debt, and basically once this loan is paid off, or when the value of your property increases, then you just remove that security, and then the family guarantee or family pledge is gone. Now, I think this is a great strategy. It's not something that's suitable for everyone. Some parents I know that they just stress out massively about this stuff. I know my mum is like that. But if your folks are open to it, or your family member is open to it, that it can be a way that you get into the property market sooner, and you get to keep all of your deposit cash that you can keep in your emergency fund to give you peace of mind. So it sounds risky and it sounds stressful, but it's pretty simple, because the real risk is that you just choose to stop paying the loan. Or obviously you want to protect yourself with like income replacement insurance and that sort of stuff, so that you've got a good job and you know that you can continue to service the loan. But so long as you can continue to service the loan, and as long as that mortgage payments keep getting made, then there's no risk. So, well, I shouldn't say there's no risk. That might not be the right thing to say, but the risks are very easily managed in a lot of cases. So while it can sound a bit scary, I would strongly encourage you that if that's something that you think might be suitable for you, make sure you have a good chat with your mortgage broker, because they can step you through and help you understand how it works in detail, to think it more whether it could apply, or whether you could take advantage. Now, I'm going to change gears a little bit and jump into property strategy. Thought I'd do this. Just saw a few questions come through on the Q&A. Shona's asking, hey, would you recommend saving 20% deposit or getting the foot in the door sooner and paying your LMI? Well, Shona, there's no one answer to that question, but I would not be afraid of LMI, to put it that way. I think that, like you say, that you're having to save for so long to get there, and then the property market just keeps running and you end up missing out. So obviously you want to make sure that you can afford the property, but outside of that, then I don't think LMI is something to be afraid of. Sometimes it's just the cost of doing business. Ian says, what are your thoughts on remortgaging for a better interest rate initial cost? Yeah, good question, Ian. It is something that you should be aware of. I would say, though, that if you're better off within sort of 18 months, and I suppose the question is really that, to give a bit further context, that when you refinance a mortgage, there's generally like an application fee that you pay, or a startup fee. You need to make sure that you're better off, not just that you have a lower interest rate, but that you're saving more than what those costs are. I would say that if you're better off within 18 months, then it's probably worth it. If you're not, then, and it takes longer than that, it's probably likely that the mortgage market will move in that time again, and then it could mean that maybe you don't ever get the benefit of that. Plus, it's not to be underestimated the amount of work that goes into doing that. Mila says, are these two loans, loan one and loan two, considered to be mortgages, or are these consumer loans? They're just mortgages. They're just regular mortgages. It's just the security is tied, and I think that's for the family guarantee. Cheers, Mila. And Amy, do you or other good financial planners provide property investment recommendations, or do you recommend another professional when buying a home or investment property? That's a really good question, Amy. I think that the difference is that what a financial planner can do when it comes to your property is that they help you. And I am going to actually explain the planning process in detail, but it's like, let's understand your situation. Let's figure out how much can you afford to spend? How much should you borrow? How should you structure it? Should you buy your own home? Should you buy an investment? What is the difference between the two so that you can confidently pull the trigger on your purchase? What a financial planner doesn't do is say you should go and buy 10 Smith Street, a specific property. We do, though, have some general philosophy. So like our philosophy is to say, and I'll probably talk about this in asset selection, but I may as well cover it now. Buy close to Sydney CBD, not just Sydney, but the metro CBD areas, not in the CBD because there's high density sort of housing there, which can drag on property growth over time. But buy close to the CBD in desirable suburbs, lower density, ideally. Sydney's eastern suburbs, the inner west, they all have strict controls on the density of properties that are there, as opposed to there are certain growth pockets in Sydney where they're just smashing it with heaps of high density housing. And that stuff's all fine, like they're lovely places, but if you want, it's that supply and demand equation that you go for. So these are the sorts of things that we cover, these general principles. And then you can go off and find the property yourself, or for a lot of our clients, well, not a lot, but a decent chunk will choose to work with a buyer's agent, like a professional, so that they can help them. And they're the ones that say, hey, there are these 3 properties, they're matching your brief. I think they're a good deal. Then they help you negotiate it on as well. Amy, hope that one helps. One from Teresa here, before I move on. Tossing up between investing in a property or investing in shares. I know you said over the long term property can be better, but given the high housing prices, servicing the mortgage is significantly more than renting. Given that, do you think investing in shares is better in the short to mid term? Well, look, I think I totally get it, that it is actually cheaper to rent than buying an equivalent house. And even though the rates are really low at the moment, it's still, they're going to go up over time as well. So definitely something to be aware of there. That being said, that the leverage element of having this big property asset that's working for you is something that really a share portfolio will really struggle to keep up with. And Teresa, just as an idea, think that you can actually just buy an investment property and then rent a property, and then you get the best of both worlds. Might come back to that one. Oh, there we go. So one of the key things, and I'll go through the different property strategy things for you to be aware of here, but some of the key questions that you need to ask and answer is, do you buy property as an investment versus your own home? And there is a difference. I've actually got an example, which I'll share with you on that. Think about how much deposit to put in, how much of your cash do you want to actually tie up in the property. That's important. Where to buy, and I talked a bit about asset selection. That's our philosophy around that, making sure that you've got limited supply and strong demand. There's a lot of ABS. I don't want you to get too much caught up in the information overload here, but there's a lot of ABS data that shows a projected population growth in different suburbs. So we look at that, and you can see where that's expected moving forward. That suggests that the demand for properties will be supported over time. Then you need to find, as I say, restricted supply, and that goes a long way to the fundament, like ticking the fundamentals of your property purchase. Where to buy, balancing your home versus your non-home assets. This is a really one thing that people don't always think of, but your home is really what sort of not really an asset. It is a financial asset and there is a value tied to it, but if you live in your home forever, it's not an asset that ever is going to give you any benefit other than a lovely roof over your head. So I suppose the thing to think about is that if you've got total, say you've got total wealth of $2 million, if you've got a $1.5 million home, you've only got $500,000 in financial assets that are going to generate you an income, allow you to live on in the future, right? That means you've got 25% of your portfolio, 25% of your overall wealth that's in financial assets, and 75% in your property, in your home, which has a value, but it's not a financial asset. If you flip that around and say you own a $500,000 home, and then you've got a $1.5 million share portfolio, you're going to be much richer because you've got 75% of your wealth is tied up in, is linked to assets that are actually making you money as opposed to giving you a nice roof over your head. So the key to answering this question is that you need to sort of look ahead and look at, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and see like what's your total wealth position going to be, and then how much of that is going to be linked to your home, because it's an area that a lot of people stuff up. And I see these people, house price obviously really expensive in all major cities in Australia, that you want to get a nice house and you push too much, but you're not leaving enough left over for your other wealth building strategies, and you end up basically like a poor person with a really nice house. Something to keep aware of. Understand as well that there can be stepping stones to your dream home. You don't need to push and get the dream home on the first go. If you want to ultimately work up to a $2 million property, a $2 million home, say, if you buy a $1 million home today, you've basically hedged your exposure to half of that property. Then in the future, you buy another $1 million property, you've got two $1 million properties. Theoretically, and this is obviously rough, like a rough guide, but you should be able to be close to selling those properties and then buying the home that you want as well. So understand what the stepping stones can be. As I say, that doesn't account for tax and fees and all of that sort of stuff, which is not insignificant. So, you've got to do your numbers, but broadly, that can be an approach to get you there. Understanding negative gearing as well is something that's important, because there are some tax benefits that you get. Basically, if you've got an investment property, you are able to deduct on your tax the interest or the net cost of that property, and that can give you a bit of a really good tax kicker. God, I don't know what I was doing with these slides, but I'll put them all up here. But basically, I've got an example. This is actually a client of ours that we went through. Their income was $110,000. Their total expenses, including the tax that they pay on their income, was $60,000, and they were paying rent of $20,000, $400 a week in rent. Their net cash flow for them is $30,000. So he was saving $30,000 a year. Now, buying a property, he wanted to buy a home. He was super keen to get into his own place. We did the numbers and showed that if he was to buy a home, income's the same, expenses the same, no longer paying rent though. So the rent cost would go, but start paying mortgage, and I've done $700,000 mortgage, just the interest costs on this property. So it's not principal repayments, because I wanted to give a comparable example here. Ongoing property costs of 1%. So that's your strata rates. And I don't think I put that in the basics piece, but that's a good guide for people. If you buy a $500,000 property, your ongoing costs are probably going to be about $5,000 a year. Buy $1 million property, about $10,000 a year. So 1% of the value of that property. So property costs here, $7,000. And then the net cash flow, again, is $14,000 a year. So it's gone down from $30,000 to $14,000. We flipped it around and said, well, what if we bought an investment instead? Now, buying the property as an investment, income the same, expenses the same, still paying the rent because you're still renting, mortgage costs the same, property costs the same, but there's rental income now coming through. And 4% is a good guide for gross rental income. You see, though, that in this example, all of the rent is paying the expenses. And so the net cash flow is actually unchanged and saving an extra $15,000 a year. Keep in mind with this example that the mortgage costs are only 3%. When they double to 6%, the difference between these numbers is going to increase. And it makes it even worse off to be in a home. Now, there is no one right way here. This client in particular, he actually, after going through the numbers, he still chose to buy a home because that was what he really wanted. But there is a difference, and he was aware that he was paying a price for that difference, essentially. So it's important to run your numbers when you're looking at buying property. Do the numbers so that you can understand, balance what you want and how you feel about stuff versus the financial impact as well. Because while this guy chose to go down this path, for some people you'd really prefer the extra $16,000 a year in your savings account, or to apply to reducing your mortgage, than having that feature all your favorite shade of tangerine. Some of the property mistakes that I see people make that keen to run through. Firstly, I just want to call out, and this is not a mistake, but you can only manage risk that you understand, right? What that means is that one of the things that stops a lot of people from purchasing property is that they don't know where the risk is coming from. And in that case, it's really scary. If you don't know where the risk is coming from, you don't know how you can manage it. So you need to first identify where is risk actually coming from. Then think about what you can do to reduce the risk. Okay, well, I might get sick. I can manage that risk with income replacement insurance. Or what if the interest rates go up? Well, you can manage that by planning, making sure that you can afford it ahead of time, essentially. So you need to lay these things out so that you can see how you manage them. There's always some risk left over. Risk is what makes you money. Buying shares is risky, buying property is risky, doing nothing has risk attached to it as well. So understand what risk you're comfortable with and what risk you're not comfortable with, and then jam as much of the risk you're comfortable with into your investments as you can, because then you're going to benefit the most from them, making sure that you've avoided all of the risk that you don't want, or manage it as much as you can. And the other one that I've got here is offset account versus redraw. There is a difference, guys. There is a difference if you pay put money in an offset account versus put money into a redraw, pay down your mortgage and have it available in redraw. There's this weird, and I sort of get it, but it's also a little bit weird that in the tax rules, if you pay down your mortgage directly, not using an offset account, but make extra repayments into your mortgage, and then saying you buy this home, you're smashing down the mortgage, you think you're doing the right thing, and then in 5 years' time, you decide that you want to buy your dream home or buy your the next property on your, the next stepping stone property, you redraw the money out and you use that then to purchase the home. Now, the tax laws say that because you've drawn the money out to buy a home, and a home is not an investment and therefore the interest is not deductible. Whereas if you use an offset account and put all of the money into your offset account, and then 5 years later you want to go buy a home, you can draw the money out of the offset, you can put it into the home, and then your debt goes up on your property that you want to keep as an investment property, means that you're maximizing your deductions. So understand, it is a bit nuanced, but understand the difference between these two so that you end up getting the right, you don't do something that you regret later on. Lifestyle risk is something that's really important to manage. And this is the risk that you buy a property with what's going on with your lifestyle today, not thinking about how you want things to change over time. And one of the things that we see is where people buy a property, then they want to start a family, thinking about time out of the workforce. Maybe they want to work, on a part-time basis for a few years. Then you layer in childcare costs and schooling costs and these things that all change. And if you could buy this property that's actually an amazing property today, but it could end up being a terrible decision for you, even if the property is growing well, because it means that you can't afford it, then you're forced to sell it at a time that you don't want. You could end up losing money on that, and then you're sort of out of the market. So I've actually had this happen to clients before, ones that hadn't planned before going down this path, and it's a real nightmare. But something that's easy enough to I'm not going to say it's easy to avoid, but it's straightforward to avoid if you just take the time to map out how you want things to change over time and make sure that your property purchase it fits in with that. Sounds simple, but it's a lot of people overlook it. Making choice in isolation. This is sort of similar-ish in that people look at, is this a good property? Is this property a good investment? Or it can apply to are these shares a good investment? Or what do I do with $10,000? But really the key to making that decision in the right way is by knowing that you've got all of your investments working together as part of your bigger picture. Really important. Seeking the best option is something that I see a lot in the property market. It normally comes from the engineers, where you spend a lot of time analyzing, growth rates in suburbs versus rental yields versus all of these different things. And you're basically, we never know what the best thing is until time has passed. So don't waste your time trying to figure out what's the best. Just settle. And settle is one of my least favorite words, but settling for something that's good and then taking action and building momentum now is generally going to give you better results than trying to, find this best thing that we never actually know what it is anyway. Unconscious prioritization. This is something that, and especially for people that have got a long roadmap to getting, building their property deposit or getting into property, that we're always prioritizing with our money. We prioritize, risk over tax, that's spending today over our savings, all of those different things. You want to make sure when you're making decisions, if you think about them from the 50,000 foot level, you generally make different decisions to what you do in the moment. And that can then sabotage the results that you get over time. So take the time, elevate your thinking, go that 50,000 foot level, set your priorities, and then make sure that your strategy is consistent, and what your behavior is that is consistent with what those priorities are. Getting the wrong advice is something that can be a real throw a real spanner in the works when it comes to property. I've unfortunately seen a ton of people. Thankfully, more regulation is coming to the property space as well. But you've got unlicensed buyers agents or mortgage brokers recommending these properties and getting huge commissions off the back of that. That stuff, these mediocre properties, will be a noose around your neck for years to come. So before going, when you're playing in the property space, make sure you're asking lots of questions and being aware of that potential for conflict of interest. I try to use, when we use buyer's agents, use a fee for service buyer's agent, or one that what the cost is going to be, instead of one that's getting kickbacks from their developer mates. Those are the things that can influence the price that you pay, because it's ultimately, yes, there is an element of needing a marketing budget for these developers, but sometimes it's just coming out of your pocket at the end of the day as well. So be aware, ask heaps of questions. Ideally, look for someone that's fee for service, and you're probably going to go a decent way to getting the right outcomes, or avoiding bad outcomes, probably more so. So guys, look, in terms of next steps, I just wanted to step you through how to actually plan around your property purchase and what to do. Now, this slide that I've got here this is the planning framework that we guide clients through when helping them with their financial planning. But for you guys watching on, it's the same process that you all need to use when you buy property, or at least you should use if you want to buy property in a way that you know that you're not missing anything, that you're taking full advantage, and importantly, that you've got confidence to take action. So I'll step you through each of the points. The first one here is get focused, and focus in on what's actually important to you. Are you buying property to make money, or are you buying property because it's just what your parents drilled into you from a young age? Is it, what is the reason why you're doing this? And then what other things are important to you as well beyond the property purchase? Then you want to understand all of the things that are going to impact your plan. What money's coming in, what money's going out, where's it going, all of these things, as well as how that's likely to change over time, mapping out and avoiding that lifestyle risk that I mentioned. So that's sort of the baseline stuff that you want to get in place, that you can then start layering the strategy over. So layering let's look at buying a $750,000 property versus $1 million property, buy as an investment versus own home. Look at those numbers, crunch them so that you can balance the numbers against how you feel with the different options that are there. Normally then you're going to be more drawn to a particular pathway than another. You want to just map it out. What's the action plan? What are the steps that we need to do to turn the plan into results? And then let's automate as much as we possibly can do. We've got then executing is an ongoing process, and making sure that it comes together is obviously mission critical, and that's where you get the dollars. So making sure that you're making the time, staying on the front foot, and making that happen. with your COVID, like with COVID and what's going on, you want to have a plan in place, even if you choose not to act. And you may choose, when going through the planning process, you may choose not to do anything. Probably unlikely. Most people choose to do some stuff, but at least knowing that you have the plan, and then you immediately eliminate that uncertainty of the thought, that niggling idea at the back of your mind that something is missing. Make sure that you've got a solid defensive strategy in place. Be prepared for interest rates going up. Be prepared if you lose your job. Make sure that you've got some good income replacement insurance in place to shore up your income. And guys, if things are complex, like with stuff that you've got going on, get some help. You probably should have a good mortgage broker anyway. I tend to prefer mortgage brokers over banks because they're experts in their space and they have more options. But if you need a plan to take action or engage a buyer's agent to get the confidence to pull the trigger on stuff, get it. It will pay. These things will be cost. They'll be profit centers, not costs, when you factor them in over time. And property is such a big decision that you want to make sure that you get it right. Just going to share with you these different stages that people go through with money and how you can progress through the stages as well. Essentially, they range from really bad to really good. And the things that typify the stages is how the level of progress that you're making with your money, how you're feeling about your money, and your ability to live the lifestyle that you want, make the personal choices that you want. Now, for people in the distress stage, that's when you're making no progress at all or going backwards. Understandably, you're stressed out, and from a lifestyle perspective, you're essentially trapped because you've got no money to make the personal or lifestyle choices that you want. The thing that you need to do to get out of the distress stage is make a commitment to your finances. Your money is something that is really important, but it's never urgent, so it's not going to happen on its own. You need to make a commitment to take action. That pushes you up into the next stage at least, which is stalled, and that's where you're making some progress, but it's slower, much slower than you would like. You're able to do some of the personal lifestyle things that you want to do, but that generally comes at the sacrifice of making progress at the rate that you want. And from a peace of mind point of view, you're not fully stressed out, but you do just have that niggling thought in the back of your mind that there's something that you might be missing out on, something more that you should be doing. The next stage up is comfortable. And for people in the comfortable stage, that's when you're now starting to build some real momentum with your money. Basically getting finding a nice balance between getting ahead with your money while you live the lifestyle that you want. And from a peace of mind point of view, you're feeling really starting to build a real confidence. The last stage is what I very technically named the killing it stage. And for people in the killing it stage, that's when basically making rapid acceleration from a financial perspective, no limits on the lifestyle that you can live, and understandably, you're feeling really carefree. As I said, it is a progression, and there's some key things to do to get through these stages. The first is making that commitment, but then to get from stalled to comfortable, you need to take action, and you need to do that on an ongoing basis. There's no set and forget money strategies these days that actually work because everything is changing so quickly. So you need to take action now and make sure that you're on the front foot with taking that action on an ongoing basis. And then the key to get from comfortable to killing it is that you need to maximize every opportunity that's available to you. You need to squeeze every bit of juice out of your situation. Make sure that you're doing the right thing with your debts, tax optimize, like all of those things. And that's what allows you to build the momentum the fastest. So it is a progression. It is all possible, but you need to put in the work to make it happen, or give it the focus to make it happen as well. I'm going to leave you with this quote from Derek Sivers, which says that if more information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. It means that that basically that it's not about you need to take action. It's great to have great ideas, but you need to turn those ideas into results. You need to take action. So, guys, I hope you found that helpful. Look, that the first step is a hard one. So I just, for anyone that's watching on, we do these 45-minute money breakthrough sessions. I've just popped the link into the chat box here for you. Where we do a bit of a quasi goal setting session on the biggest money opportunities that are there, as well as the roadblocks that you can clear that move you closer from where you are to where you want to be. And then an opportunity to answer questions. It's perfect for people if you're saving, a couple of grand a month, or have a decent chunk of cash to invest, or a decent chunk of equity in your property. Or for anyone that's working, in tech with these employer share plans, there's a lot of juice you can squeeze out of those as well. We're actually discounting the session for the GA peeps to $195. We donate all of the money to charity, to our charity partners. We've actually had a big impact. We've raised like $25,000 so far on that, and built like a bunch of houses, well, 5 houses actually for people in India, as well as doing some other good around the planet. So if you want to do some good and learn a bit about your money, feel free to get around that there. Link is in the chat. So I'm just going to run through the questions that are here. Adrian says, is there a significant difference in the property price growth between freestanding houses and semi-detached duplex houses? Adrian, I don't know the answer to that one. Sorry, mate. I know though that homes versus apartments are slightly different. We've seen strong growth in homes at the moment. I don't know if it's different. I imagine that there's probably an element of being more desirable if it's fully freestanding, but again, it depends on, I suppose, the property and the suburb where you're looking. Amy says, is there a rule of thumb regarding apartment, townhouse, and house price increases to apartment prices double? So yes, I think, Amy, that's sort of following on from the same questions, but they're broadly the same, although they are slightly different. I would say that you're pretty good though on either. I think house prices have gone up a lot in recent times. Apartments, there's probably a little bit more opportunity there now, but over the long term, I think that homes tend to perform slightly better than apartments. May says, is there opportunities to use your super to get into property? Well, there are actually, you can use the First Home Super Saver Scheme, which allows you to put in up to $30,000 into your super fund and then withdraw it concessionally, like before tax, and then withdraw it to buy a property. So that's an option. Be careful with that though. There are some risks around that. So if you're going to do that, make sure you get some good advice. You can also buy a property inside a super fund if you use a self-managed super fund, but it's not like a home that you can live on. So you just need to be aware and make sure you got the right strategy there. Last one from Ian. Oh, there's a bit here. Ian, I can see there's a ton of detail in there, mate. I maybe just flick that over to us after the session. We'll send a note around. Feel free to shoot that through and we can answer it that way. All right, guys. Well, thanks for sticking around. It's good to be here with you guys. Hope you found that helpful. We will shoot around the slides and a note after this. And check out the upcoming events. We've got a ton of stuff coming up with this property series. We've still got 3 more events. So for people who want to know more about property, get around that as well.